Welcome, everyone. I will wait about a minute or two to allow folks to move from uh, the waiting room. Drake, do you want to bring yours down, your slides? Okay, welcome, everyone. I'm Paz Artaza Regan. I am Program Manager at Catholic Climate Covenant. We will be getting ready to start in a second here. If you're just coming in, you may use the chat to talk with each other. Hopefully I will be able to respond to you. Okay, I have 102, and in the interest of our time here together, I will get started. I want to welcome everyone to this webinar on the impact of HR 1 on renewable energy and environmental justice. Before we get started, I do have some housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to everyone who registered within the next 24 or 48 hours. We ask that you please submit your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat, because I can't monitor chat and Q&A for questions. So if you have a question for any of the panelists, please put it in the Q&A box. If you know which panelist your question is for, put that there as well. In the chat, I always ask folks to remember to be respectful and civil in your chat interactions. If I see that that's not happening, I may give you a warning. And if it continues, I may need to do something beyond that. We always start our webinars with prayer. So if you would please join me in centering ourselves and remembering we are always in the presence of God. This is a prayer from Sister Leanne Jablonski with the Marianist Environmental Center, I believe it is called. She wrote this prayer and submitted it for our upcoming Feast of St. Francis resource, Spreading Seeds of Peace and Hope for Creation. And I thought that it would be an appropriate prayer for us to do today. So if you'll join me, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Mary, Mother of all creation, we, your family, desire to be your living presence anew. Form us as your rain, quenching parched souls with hope. Form us as your fire, illuminating indifferent hearts with faith. Form us as your wind, refreshing dusty minds with wisdom. Form us as your soil, embracing all with compassion. In all these ways of life, form us so that your seeds of justice sown deep within us will flourish, bearing abundant fruit of peace and integrity. Joined together with all creation, we will once again sing in harmony. Amen. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. At this point, I'd like to give a little bit of an introduction to this webinar. And Drake, can you stop sharing for a second? But you can keep on, but I'll be talking.
I'm not sharing. I think it's your PowerPoint. You went
Oh,
a
did I
slide.
do that? Well, thank you for letting me know that. Thank you. Um, Basically today, we have to remember what we're here for. We are going to be focused on what is called the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is HR 1. And I say so called because for many of us in the faith community and the Catholic community, it is not a beautiful bill. And in fact, I want to remind us that on the same day that we watched a small community in Texas experienced catastrophic flooding. That was the day that H.R. 1 was signed into law. And the effects of H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill, go far beyond what we're going to cover today. The U.S. Catholic community has advocated against this legislation because of the impacts on creation and because it will force people off of life-saving programs like Medicaid, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs. Many communities, like our vulnerable immigrant brothers and sisters, are now more at risk of being terrorized by ICE and having family detentions and raids. So at the same time, though, the effects of climate change are becoming more and more evident. This legislation will only make our work to deal with climate change more challenging. HR 1 has the potential of destabilizing clean energy economy and jeopardizing jobs, increasing pollution, especially for those who are more vulnerable and already vulnerable. The bill not only significantly threatens climate progress, but will also harm our neighbors and communities across the country and the world. And for many of us, the passage of this one big, beautiful bill is anything but beautiful. It is disheartening. But we are resurrection people. We always have to remember that. And we know all is not lost. Our three presenters today are here to add, not to add to our heartbreak, but to rally us to faithful action. And at this point, I will share again and present our three presenters. I am going to very quickly present, and then I will put their longer bios in the chat. So presenting today is Drake Starling, who is Senior Government Relations Advocate for Energy and Environmental Policy at Network. Dan Last, Co-Chief Executive Officer at Mission Energy, and Mission Energy is the group that operates Catholic Energies. And Leonard E. Robinson, who is the Sustainability Program Coordinator, Office of Life, Dignity, and Justice, Archdiocese of Atlanta, and host of Faith and Sustainability podcast. And the presenters will go in that order. So at this point, I will stop my share. And Drake, if you could get us started, and you're going to be giving us a bit of an overview of how HR 1 impacts creation care issues, especially on renewables, and a little bit on environmental justice as well. So go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paz. It is such a pleasure to be here. My name is Drake Starling. As we just said, I am the Senior Government Relations Advocate for Energy and Environmental Policy at Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into how HR 1, and I did see a comment in the chat. You are correct in stating it's one big bad bill. That is how I refer to it, and I'm going to keep on referring to it that way because that's what it is. There we go. So, just a quick overview. This was passed through the budget reconciliation process this past month. There were a lot of things in the bill that took healthcare away from millions of people, took SNAP benefits, and affected a lot of other people's livelihoods. In terms of what the bill did environmentally speaking, it was not good news. It was a sweeping rollback of all the climate and environmental progress that was made, not just under Joe Biden, but also under Barack Obama as well. As people of faith, this is very antithetical to what we are called to do, which is to protect creation and future generations. This is not just a policy bill that's, even though it's very wonky, it is a step backward from our moral and ecological commitments. In terms of what this means for really everyday people, it's going to increase energy costs, eliminate hundreds of thousands of clean energy jobs, and allow polluters to get away with, well, crime, and in some case, essentially what could amount to murder. There were plenty of climate and environmental rollbacks in the Big Bad Bill. In particular, it took away $80 billion from clean energy support that was passed in 2022 in the Inflation Reduction Act. In particular, those were tax credits for incentivizing solar and wind companies and even hydrogen and nuclear energy companies to onshore manufacturing jobs here in the United States to help decarbonize our economy. This lowered costs. This also, since solar and wind are fairly cheap compared to coal and fossil fuels, this made energy costs cheaper for Americans all around. What the Big Bad Bill does, now that it has repealed plenty of these provisions, is it will increase energy costs. There are a few other points here, but I understand that other panelists will be talking about environmental justice, so I'm going to leave that to them. I wanted to, in particular, map this for everyone. The Inflation Reduction Act, 80% of its clean energy tax incentives, benefits, and programs went to Republican held districts. There's actually a great tool that I'm more than happy to share with that the Washington Post compiled that shows if you can, enter your district, where you live, who your representative is. It'll show you what projects are underway, have been completed, are going to be completed, and how much money and how many jobs this has brought to the district in particular. This was a bill that was not just beneficial to Democrats or Republicans. This was a bill that was beneficial to the entire country and, as a result, the entire world. It's very unfortunate to see the rollback of many of these incentives. However, I want to remind everyone not all hope is lost for a variety of reasons. Though the tax benefits, the tax incentives, and the clean energy programs will no longer be in effect starting by and large by the end of 2025, that does not mean that the clean energy transition is gone or that it is completely out of sync with who we are. The clean energy transition to solar, wind, other renewables will continue. It will simply be slowed down. This is due to decades of market forces that are now not now, but have made renewables some of the cheapest forms of energy and electricity generation in the country, if not the world. So that's nice. That's cool that there's a manufacturing plant that creates EVs or solar panels in your community. But in particular, how is it going to hurt us as Catholics? Well, it will repeal clean energy tax credits that fuel many Catholic solar projects on church land, on parish land, on uh, land that many Catholics use, whether it's their private or public centers. It makes it harder for faith institutions to afford or expand solar installations. And like I said earlier, it slows but does not stop the clean energy transition. That will definitely continue. Now, of course, the beneficiaries of this bill, it is no surprise, are the large fossil fuel corporations, because they will be shielded from a lot of these lawsuits that will now be polluting projects, as I like to call them. And everybody who works for them essentially will benefit. That means their corporate lobbyists, Wall Street, other big banks, and the dirty oil industry itself will continue to benefit. A quick word about our response at Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. We have been mobilizing faith-based voices to urge a reversal of these tax credits for renewables to make sure that people have energy choice, energy freedom, and are good stewards of the earth like our faith calls us to be. We've been engaging lawmakers across parties to protect clean energy investments, and we'll be advocating for plenty of those in the coming months and years. Right now, the defensive work that we are engaged in at Network is to restore the energy tax credits, protect the EPA's authority, and prevent further rollbacks of what remains of the clean energy law passed in 2022. Our proactive work, looking much more long term, is to advance an economy for all that supports a clean energy transition that pushes for stronger rural and environmental justice investments and urges lawmakers to make approaches to permitting and mining reform that are very helpful for communities, indigenous tribes, and the environment. And the issue areas that we're going to be watching are on this list here, and I've already mentioned a few of them. Some of these photos, as you can see, are from our lobby day, where we were trying to engage members of Congress to prevent the rollback of this bill. And the final thoughts that I have here are that it was a setback. It is not good news, but it is truly not the end. And I don't say this out of, empty hope. I know I've seen the numbers. The clean energy transition will continue. Maybe not in the same exact way, and certainly not as quickly, but it will continue. So we are rooted in hope and solidarity. Please join us in defending creation and protecting those most harmed. If you have any questions, as Boss has already said, please drop them in the Q&A box. And if you have any questions for me in particular, feel free to email me anytime at dstarling@networklobby.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Drake. While we're getting ready for our next panelist, folks are asking for that internet site with the map. If you could put that in the chat,
Sure,
that would
absolutely.
be helpful. And if you could put your email in the chat as well, so folks have
Sure.
that immediately. I have shared everybody's bios, longer bios in the chat. I will do it again in a little while. Now we're going to move to our second panelist, who is Dan Last. And as I said, he is with Mission Energy, which is the operating arm of Catholic Energies. I've asked Dan to focus on the renewables issues that the bill brings up. Dan, I will now spotlight you. Go ahead.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. So I appreciate the introduction from Paz. I'm going to get a little bit more into the weeds on specifically how the one big bad bill, I just keep calling it the reconciliation bill, impacts solar in particular. So please feel free to ask questions. I'm going to kind of dive down into the weeds and then come back up to make sure everybody understands how it all directly impacts solar in particular. Just a reminder, Catholic Energies program, we work specifically with Catholic facilities. We've been doing this work now since 2016, believe it or not. Can't believe it's been almost a decade. And have worked on more than 50 projects in 15 states for Catholic institutions to help them identify, finance, build, and maintain their solar projects. So solar is definitely the lens I'm going to be looking at this through today, but a lot of this, you can understand how it impacts other areas of clean energy as well. I'm going to talk about a few of these things in detail here, but just to get a bit more down into the weeds from where Drake started. So in particular, and I'm focusing primarily on commercial solar. So residential solar, utility scale solar is not going to be my focus today. So I'm thinking about Catholic facilities, schools, hospitals, healthcare facilities, churches, all of that. What this bill does is it ends the investment tax credit and the direct pay by 2027, which is effectively a 30% loss of a rebate for the project. Back in 2022, when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, direct pay was a new concept, and it was created basically as a partner, or the mirror image, if you will, of the investment tax credit. I always tell the story, imagine on one side of the street prior to 2022, you had a Walmart, and on the other side of the street, you had a Catholic school, and they both did the exact same solar project. Prior to 2022, the Walmart would get a 30% tax credit, and the church would get nothing. Direct pay was created to facilitate nonprofits and other non-tax-paying entities to take advantage of that same rebate, if you will. And it's set at a base of 30%. That is now pulled back to 2027. And I'm going to go into a deeper dive here about that in just a minute. Changes to safe harbor are pending. Safe harbor, I'll get into a little bit more in just a minute, but basically what that would allow us to do would extend the tax credit into the future. So for projects that would take longer than that timeline to build, we had a way to lock that credit, that direct payment in. Some changes are coming to that. There's this new fun thing that we're all trying to figure out what it means. FIAC, Foreign Entity of Concern. I'll talk about that in just a moment here about how that impacts solar projects. And there's a few other things I'm not going to get into a lot of conversation about. They separated storage out from solar. Storage is still allowed, and that the tax credit, the direct pay, doesn't phase out until 2033. They actually extended that in this bill as a benefit for storage. So I guess that's a slightly good thing. And there's some other impacts to domestic content, which we're not going to really cover on this call, but I want to make sure to note it here. One important piece of this that did not change is the transferability. I don't want to get, again, into the financial weeds here, but what that allows you to do is if you don't have the ability to utilize that payment, you can transfer it to a third party that does. And that's very important when it comes down to financing these projects for a lot of Catholic organizations. That is still allowed. So that is a very important thing. I know it was kind of an under the radar thing that stayed in there at the very end, but we were very, very grateful for that. Unfortunately, as well, the adders. So I'll talk about energy community and low income and domestic content in a minute. Those are still allowed in the bill. So let me jump ahead here to kind of talk a little bit about the three most impactful parts of this from our perspective, as far as how they're going to impact Catholic solar going forward. So the bill basically created three distinct periods between now and the end of 2027. Between now and the end of the year, projects that begin construction. I'm going to come back to what the begin construction means in a minute. That's tied up with that safe harbor thing I talked about just a minute ago. So hold on to that for just a minute. But projects that begin construction this year have up to 4 years to finish. Basically, nothing changes for solar projects. So if you have the ability to move forward in your project before the end of the year, strongly encourage you to do so. That is, as defined here, the most safe option. The less safe option is that if you begin the project after 2025, but before July 4th of next year, which is 1 year after the bill was signed, you have up to 4 years to finish, just like you do now, but the FIAC restrictions, which I'll talk about in a minute, kick in. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to get the project completed if you wait until 2026. If you begin construction after July 4th of next year, you have until the end of 2027, and that is it. If the project is not complete by the end of 2027, you would forfeit the direct payment. So very important dates in here just to keep track of. The bottom line is that projects that don't move quickly will lose out on the direct pay. Another perhaps unintended, or maybe it was intended, impact here, and I'm seeing this right now with a couple of projects we're doing in some very high impact states, is that this is increasing the uptake of some of the statewide incentives. And those incentive blocks are going down much faster than they were before because people are moving a lot faster now. So not only may you lose the direct pay from the federal government, but the bucket of money that the state has allocated may run out sooner than was expected. Safe harbor, this, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. I just want to explain why this is such an important thing that I think went under the radar a little bit as well. So the way that it has been reported in the media is that a promise was made to the Freedom Caucus that they would tighten up the safe harbor rules, which is what developers would use to, like I said, extend that tax credit for 4 years. So imagine you were a developer building a much larger project and it was going to take 2 or 3 years to build. You could do various things. If you began construction, it obviously counts as starting construction. But for many developers, what they would do is they would spend 5% of the project cost in that year, and that would count the same way as if there was actually a shovel in the ground. The Treasury Department right now is reviewing those rules, and with the potential that they will significantly rewrite those rules. If they do that and they no longer allow, say, you to spend money in lieu of actually doing work on a project, that will definitely impact the timelines that I just posted on the previous slide. We're tracking this really closely right now to figure out exactly where the final rules are. But if they do tighten this rule up as expected, and they tighten it up more than we would accept, it's going to make it even harder to hit the deadlines in there, because we're going to have to then do actual physical work, which can't be done until a project is permitted and materials are received and so on and so forth. So I want to make clear that this was not something that was included in the bill, but was included as an executive order shortly after the bill was signed, and is another layer that we're trying to sort of weed through right now. Briefly on this foreign entity of concern piece, this was a new law aimed at preventing foreign entities from benefiting from solar projects. It had sort of two main focuses. Foreign-owned companies, which is the primary focus for most of the type of work we're going to talk about, but also foreign-owned investors. You can't take money from an entity based in any one of these four countries and then receive the full investment tax credit. The piece that is being written right now is, what do these rules actually mean and how are they going to be implemented? As you all probably know, we don't really buy anything from Iran, North Korea, and very little from Russia. China is a very integral part of the global solar supply chain. Disentangling from Russia has been happening for years without this bill. What we're concerned about in this bill is the paperwork required to document. And that's what we just don't know yet. It might be very hard for smaller developers or smaller projects to actually get the paperwork required. We're waiting again to see what the final rules are to understand, but this has been described as by some as the poison pill in the bill because we're simply waiting to see how difficult it's going to be to get through these regulations once they're published. What's the overall impact? I've been saying this to pretty much everybody for the last month. It could have been worse, but we shouldn't say that anything in the bill was a positive for clean energy in any way, shape, or form. The underlying result is it's going to make projects more expensive. There's no way to get around that. And we obviously applaud everything that Drake and his team and several other organizations are doing to try to work with Congress to restore these tax credits. I'll talk about that in just a minute here. There's been different publications, it's all prognostication, but anywhere between 15 and 50% of installations will drop over the next decade. That will obviously drastically increase by 2027. I've seen that basically growth will stall completely after 2027 if the tax credit is not restored, which just means we're not going to be keeping up with the power demands. And if I could say one thing and one thing only to the folks on the webinar, if you have been considering solar, I'll say this specifically personally for your own personal residence, you have until the end of 2025. Your project has got to be completed if you're going to pay cash for that project. Not something I'm covering on this call, but please call your local solar installer and give them the business before the end of the year. Specifically for Catholic organizations that run commercial properties, now is the time to try to fast track. And I know that that's kind of it's difficult in the Catholic world to move quickly, but the faster you can move to make quick decisions, the better you're going to be. We are working overtime right now to try to work with as many organizations as we can to get contracts signed and get equipment ordered, because once you hit 2026, as we've said, it just gets more and more difficult. I will echo some of what Jake said in my final slide here. All is not lost. It is a reality. 86% of new generation last year was from renewable sources. That progress, that reality is not going to be derailed. If you wanted to permit and build a coal-fired power plant today, it might be 5 years before that project comes online. We can have a large solar project online in less than a year and a larger solar project online in less than 18 months. That reality isn't going away. One of the things I think many of you are probably starting to see on your own personal electric bills, and those of you who run organizations are seeing it as well, power bills are just going up. I live here in Loudoun County, Virginia, in the heart of Data Center Alley, and I can tell you data centers are going, and they're going fast, they're going up, they're getting bigger, and the power demand is just increasing. We're not going to stop this by policy. Electricity demand is going to keep growing up, and the need for power is going to come somewhere. So solar, wind, they all move faster. It is going to be a reality that these things are going to continue to get built. We just have to figure out how to make them economically feasible so that it doesn't slow things down. On the positive, the direct pay incentive is still there for nonprofits. It didn't get taken away. Utilize it while it is there. As I mentioned, storage is still viable. And with the help of storage, some projects I'm seeing can, and this kind of goes to that last point as well, the industry is adapting. I'm seeing a lot more storage and solar interest. A lot of states are reallocating money to their storage programs as well. Where we can do storage and solar together, projects can become a lot more economically viable. So take a look at that as well as a way to make it more economically feasible to push forward with projects. I'll again provide these slides to Paz so that she can send them along. But any questions, we're happy to work with you. We've gotten more calls over the last 3 weeks than we probably got for the first 6 months of the year. So please do reach out if you have questions about your particular project, and I'll answer any questions we can to help you guys, help anybody on the call take action as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, and if folks have questions directly for Dan or Drake, put them in the Q&A. Say it's for Dan, say it's for Drake, say it's for Leonard. I'll be able then to uh, ask those questions at the end. Um, the next speaker uh, will be focusing on the bill's impacts on environmental justice, the vulnerable communities. And if you notice how we set up the webinar, the overview, then a focus on the impacts on clean energy, renewables, and now we're going to focus on the impacts on vulnerable communities of color, the poor. Leonard, you can take it away and let me make sure that you're spotlighted.
Okay. Okay. Again, my name is Leonard Robinson. I serve as the Sustainability Coordinator and Consultant for the Archdiocese of Atlanta. And I also host the Faith and Sustainability podcast. And I think I have my next two guests when we get to HR1 and the impact of HR1. So anyway, I just want to, I'm honored to be here today. As people of faith, we know environmental justice is not a fringe issue. It's a moral imperative. So let's explore how HR1 has reshaped the landscape and how we, as believers, are rising in response. A couple of scriptures before we start. Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression. Isaiah 1:17. Genesis 2:15 tells us the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and to keep it. Okay, that being said, let's get to the some of the fiscal impacts of HR1. As the two speakers talked before, a lot of energy projects will be shuttered. Some will be fast tracked, some will be shuttered, some are going to be dead in the water unless there's something done. Well, communities of color, environmental justice communities, disadvantaged communities, underserved communities, marginalized community, whatever the term is, uh, these communities were the biggest beneficiaries of this direct pay, not directly, but the clean air potential, the impact on these communities. So, it's not like a lot of solar is going to go into the environmental justice communities directly, but there's a direct benefit. Well, now EJ block grants, the funds rescinded 2.8 billion and defunded grassroots and frontline communities. Okay, that's part of it. Greenhouse gas reduction fund. Right now, first brush, just reading all 900 pages of it, trying to pick out, hey, what's immediate? There's $27 billion halted clean energy projects by nonprofits. The IRA allowed nonprofits and faith-based organizations to benefit by it instead of involving a third party. Well, that's now being taken away. Climate monitoring and pollution funds, hundreds of millions of dollars. Can't really estimate, but we know it's going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Schools lost tools to reduce pollution, and improve air. EPA EJ grants, nearly 800 grants in environmental justice communities are going to be lost. Breathing in the cuts, health consequences. When policy ignores pollution, our bodies bear the pain. These cuts just didn't shrink budgets, they widen health disparities. A rise in asthma and lung illness from lost air monitoring, increase in lead, PFAS, and nitrate exposure from stalled water testing. Toxins lingering in communities as cleanup grants vanish. Urban heat exacerbated by defunded cooling initiatives. See, the faces, these aren't budget cuts. These are people. These are elderly. These are children. These are the vulnerable, not just budget cuts. Here's some examples of the impact of HR1. West Oakland, California, air monitoring. There's they're anticipating a surge in asthma and ER visits. Jackson, Mississippi, water infrastructure, outbreak of stomach viruses. El Paso, Texas, EJ youth grants. North Carolina flood zones, brownfields cleanup. Again, these are all the things that impact environmental justice communities. But faith responds with action. You know, we're faith people. We're people of faith, and we're moving forward in faith. In First Samuel, David faced Goliath, and he had faith. But you know what he also did? He also picked up the stone. Bible says faith without works is dead. So let's take our faith and put it to action. Let's have justice vigils, indoors and outdoors and online. Sermon and liturgy grounded in creation care. Let's hear it from the pulpit. Faith for justice pledges by congregants. Eco-justice teams forming in churches, temples, and mosques. Call-ins and petitions that center moral urgency. Strategic advocacy and resilience. This is what the bill cut: local EJ policies and ordinances, interfaith partnerships with mayors and councils, grassroots funding to revive lost initiatives, and youth-led sustainability projects. So this is our response. Yes, a lot of federal support is going to be cut. So now we turn locally. We turn to philanthropic funding. We turn to people of goodwill that want to do good. We give them that avenue. We work together with state. We work together with business and everything. We outreach because we're breathing all the same air, especially in these environmental justice communities. Now, this is the Archdiocese. This is what particularly the Archdiocese of Atlanta is doing. And this is what we've always been doing, and we're going to improve. We're going to do even more, especially with the advent of HR 1. We've got the Laudato Si initiative. It's a program where we're working with all the parishes, schools, priests, and everybody in northern Georgia, 1.3 million Catholics, over 100 parishes, and about 18 schools that we're putting together a sustainability program. We also have the Laudato Si action plan. Next year will be its 10th year. The action plan gives simple, medium, and difficult pollution prevention and climate change addressing steps that people, parishes, and schools can take. And I do have the QR code underneath. If you want a copy of any of these, the QR code underneath. I mentioned that I'm the host of the Faith and Sustainability podcast. And we're right at the intersection of faith and sustainability. These are the type of issues we like to bring out. We want the world to know that the faith-based people and people of goodwill, as stated by Pope Francis in the Laudato Si, are moving forward, that we're here. We care about creation care. Even before Laudato Si, Catholic social teachings teaches us people, planet, prosperity. So we're moving forward. We want to work with our local, and that's what we're doing at the Archdiocese of Atlanta. We're working with the local government in all the 56 counties that we have impact in. We're going to work with each and every one hand in hand. You've got to get at the table, because if you're not at the table, you're going to be on the menu. And then also we have a vlog series where we're doing videos, people, planet, and health. The QR code underneath, we just pushed out the first chapter, and we're going to do more and more. But this is to get the word out, to let people know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how they can take action. So the call to action I have is 3 things that you can do this week. Take a Faith for Justice pledge. Call one local official about an EJ ordinance. In other words, let's move into local, let's move into state, let's move into county, let's move into city, local ordinances. And start an eco-justice team, a care for creation team, a green team. I don't care what you call it, but start that team and start looking at these issues of what are we going to do. HR 1, it might be a bump in the road. We might have to go around it, but it's not going to stop us. Our faith is strong. Our actions are following up, and I appreciate the time to get this out. Uh, Not to do a shameless plug, but listen to the podcast because we're going to talk about this more and more and actions you can take. And I want to close that with we're the ones that we've been waiting for. We've heard this before, and we truly are the ones. You see the picture. It starts with us. We put our finger in our chest. We move forward. Part of our team, we've got two people on the team who are grassroots heroes. That's Jay Bassett, formerly with EPA, and Susan Varlamov, who's the author of our Laudato Si action plan. They are moving forward. They're working with us, and then we're going beyond the boundaries of the Archdiocese of Atlanta. So reach out to us with questions, with comments, and join us. Any questions? Is my contact information, and you'll get a copy. You'll get a copy of this presentation as well. But you know, listen to the podcast, look into the action plan, watch the vlog, and give us ideas as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonard, and thank you for ending your presentation on a positive note. I saw that Dan and Drake also did that. Thank you, because I know that after the bill passed, there was a lot of feeling like all is lost. And I think all three panelists show that no, uh, bump in a road, little sidewards turn, but as people of faith, we are able to readjust and look at the long term. I am going to start us off with some questions. Um, Leonard, if you could stop share so that everybody's images will be bigger for folks to see, that might be perfect. Thank you. We do have a few questions and more are coming in. I'm going to get us started with bringing a couple of the questions together, and that has to do with resiliency, projects that are about resilience. And I think, Leonard, you started on that. Drake, I believe that you, on the policy side, can also respond to the kind of work that the faith community can do to increase resilience programming in our parishes, in our dioceses, in our communities. And Dan, if you've got something that you want to pull on that, feel free to come in. But Leonard, do you want to start us off? You're muted.
Okay. Uh, what we're doing now is there's resilient city uh, organizations that you can go and they can give you information on resiliency and what you have to do. We're working with the various counties. Like right now, we're working with Cobb County, and they've got this list of sustainability initiatives and resiliency that and it mirrors what we're doing. So rather than duplicating efforts, we're working with I guess what I'm saying is go local, work with your cities, work with your counties, work up with the Resilient City organization to find out, steps you need to do.
Excellent. And if anybody wants to talk with Leonard, we can put you together. The Archdiocese of Atlanta, way ahead on working locally because they got started in 2015 with their Laudato Si action plan. So thank you for that, Atlanta. Drake, Dan, who wants to touch resilience?
I
I'm
can
going to
speak.
let Dan talk on this because I think he has a little bit more of a hands-on approach than I do, where it's a little bit more policy-minded.
I appreciate it, Drake. What I can say is this, and it's funny because it's very timely. I've been looking at several projects across the country, two for two large archdioceses and one for a group of parishes in Illinois. I want to lean back to what I said about energy storage and what folks I know are posting about faith-based centers and organizations becoming places of refuge. There are a number of programs right now, programs that are new to me as of the last several weeks, where we are actually going to be able to install batteries at not just no cost, but where actually it will pay the organizations to have storage. In many states right now, particularly energy strained states out west, but also several other states have created their incentive programs to make it basically the same way. They will pay not only for the equipment, not only for the engineering and for the installation, but they will then pay you to have that power at a backup as long as you do certain things and release the power onto the grid at certain times. So what I would say is that organizations who have maybe either in states that have already made reductions to their net metering rules where they're not paying quite as much, or where you're just curious about whether this sort of program would work for you, reach out. Happy to answer your questions. But it is definitely one way that I think that faith-based organizations can take a meaningful action here, and again, not have to dip into their bank accounts in order to pay for it.
Thank you. And Creation Justice Ministry has a whole program on climate resilience and the faith community, and Covenant is most likely going to get more involved in this. So more to come on this issue. I think the next kind of clump of questions has to do with policy. So we move first to Drake. And the question is, Drake, what can we do to support repeal of
The
BBB?
repeal.
Uh-huh. But I would say not just the repeal, but what can we do to make the bill, like what kind of things can people advocate? Can you repeat a little bit of what you said about the things that we can start moving to take away the bad things that just passed?
Yeah, so I think it's important to be not just on the defensive side. I think it's important to be proactive of what we want. There are several bills right now there are several bills that have been proposed in Congress that would be devastating in terms of environment and racial justice and clean energy, of course. Um, Pieces of them are moving forward, other pieces are not. There are other bills, such as, well, I'll talk about the first batch. For example, there's a bill currently attached to the appropriations package called the Mining Regulatory Clarity Act. This is a bill. The reason I bring this up is because in order for solar and wind to act and electric vehicles and battery storage to be a thing, we need minerals, and the types of minerals that they need are currently not regulated in the same way they are across the rest of the developed world. So the Mining Regulatory Clarity Act would unfortunately take us even further away from where we need to be by loosening the very few regulations around mining in on public lands in indigenous spaces, and that coupled with the um, sort of rollback of a lot of environmental protections, not just in the most recent bill, but because of recent court decisions, would put us at a significant disadvantage for the environment. So that's one batch of bills. I just mentioned one, but there are several like that. There's another group of bills, for example, on the flip side, the Clean Energy Minerals Reform Act. This would update the 1872 incredibly antiquated mining law and make it as sustainable as it possibly could be, while protecting indigenous communities, while protecting rural communities, while also protecting the environment and still extracting certain types of minerals from the earth without, an excruciating, burden of damage on them. I think it's important to advocate not just for those types of bills so that the politicians that are supposed to serve us understand that we want more than just being on the defense. We want something that goes beyond where we were before. So I think it's important to get familiar with the current bills that are being proposed, and I'll name that. I'll admit that right now, um, we still don't know what the fall congressional calendar is going to look like. Congress is about to go into recess at the end of tomorrow, as of this week, so they will likely not pass anything for the entirety of August. They come back the first week of September after Labor Day to allegedly do their job, which is to serve the American people and our interests. They don't always seem to do that. But there is on the table mining reform, permitting reform, as well as perhaps a sell-off of national parks and public lands throughout the western states and throughout the country. These are still not, I want to caution everyone, this is what a lot of Republicans are thinking and what they tried to pass, at least some of these things, in the big bad bill. But that does not necessarily mean that they will try and attempt to do that in the fall. But I'm going to put my money on the fact that they will try to do it again. Uh, we haven't seen any real text yet for some of those things, but the moment we do, um, Network will be pushing out webinars educating our field. If you'd like to join us, we are more than happy to have you to get engaged, to talk to your representative, to tell them to keep not just what remains of the IRA in place, but also to make sure that we don't sell our public lands, that we actually do have some sort of comprehensive environmentally friendly and human-centered mining and hard rock mining reform and permitting reform as well. So I know that was quite a lot, but I can't say with any certainty that those things are going to happen right now. But some of them look likely, some of them don't. It does depend on the exact issue we're talking about.
Thank you, Drake. A
One, one
couple
other
of
one
questions.
one other quick thing just to add on to what Drake is saying. I will concur with what Drake said, everything he said, but I want to just take a quick 1 minute to talk about we're going to talk about a fun topic, data centers. I really want to underscore it. It is going to be the driver of the largest increase in electric consumption in the history of mankind. We do not have enough power in this country. And at some point, those two things are going to come colliding together. And the reality, as I said, are going to hit hard. I have had several conversations with data centers, those are adjacent and working within the data center community. And the prevailing idea is that everyone is sort of sitting on their hands right now because there's so many other things that they want the government to do that they don't want to ruffle feathers right now. But like I said, those two things are going to come together. And when they do, there's going to be the opportunity to attach other things to a law that makes it easier for permitting and for other sorts of things. That is a real opportunity that we all have to influence the bill here and to influence these credits, because if we're going to be building renewable energy as fast as these large consumers need, we're going to have to provide every economic benefit possible, because they're not just going to do it because someone wags a finger at them. So keep your eyes and ears open for news about data centers and permitting reform and transmission. It sounds all super boring, but I promise you it is incredibly important and perhaps a very real opportunity for us to put our voices back in front of our congresspeople, who will then pass a law that may scoop some of these things up that have been included in the past in these reconciliation bill.
Yep. And it's usually a very local issue to deal with because it's
Very local.
happening in your neighborhood. You got issues of noise, you've got issues of pollution. And now they're also talking about bringing small nuclear reactors to be attached to the data centers and connected to gas reactors. So lots of issues there. On a similar sort of question that it may be a Dan and Drake. The question was regarding the push towards carbon capture as one of the solutions and the LNG exporting, liquid natural gas exporting. How do those things connect with how the bill got passed? Like how much of that is in the bill?
Off the top of my head, from what I recall, direct carbon capture and storage, the acronym for it is DCCS. Um, First of all, is uh, pie in the sky. It's not a solution to carbon emissions whatsoever. The reason that this is really a topic of conversation in, well, media in general, is because the fossil fuel industry likes it a lot because it gives them an excuse to continue emitting greenhouse gases without actually having to do anything serious about their economic model or system or mode of operation and production. it also does not fully, well, it doesn't really solve the problem. And it's very expensive. The technology is not yet fully there. Leslie, I see your comment. It is a false solution. Um, but of course, there were, I believe, subsidies for it. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that the subsidies passed in the IRA for it were actually increased in the One Big Bad Bill.
They were.
So yeah, so I think that this is now something that Republicans in general are happy about because they can say, on the one hand, oh, we're still keeping the fossil fuel industry afloat, but we're also, solving the problem that the fossil fuel industry creates. They're not solving the problem.
Uh, the next question, Leonard, do you have a sample ordinance that you have thought of working with? And because folks are trying to figure out what is a local ordinance that they might be able to work on. Think you're muted.
If a community has a sustainability plan, part of sustainability is environmental justice, environmental equity. So I would, again, I would turn towards, now I don't have any specific examples of ordinances and everything because again, just doing the study on the HR1, I find that if we continue doing the way we're doing, working with, if the parishes will work with the city councils and the county commissioners, and our, our regional organizations like the Atlanta Regional Commission, working together. There are environmental, but I don't know any specifics, but there are ordinances in there. And if not, just ideas for ordinances and everything. Hey, if you're gonna, put it in your planning department or your land use department. Hey, if you're gonna put up solar or fast tracking solar permitting as much as you can locally in environmental justice areas. Uh, Maybe more local fund, diverting more local funding into these environmental justice areas that are considering solar or that are considering community solar, are considering put charging, charging stations and everything. So again, think global but act locally.
Thank you. I am putting in the chat the answer for another one of the questions. They wanted to know how to join or start a green team. Catholic Climate Covenant does have the Creation Care Teams program. Plug for my program, so excuse me. So I put that there. To close us off, I think the question is regarding China. And the question, I think, is how much of a threat really is us removing ourselves from the Chinese solar market, and first, how much of a threat will China be in the whole solar issues globally, perhaps? Drake?
Yeah, I'd first like to say that China has sort of won, not just the trade game, but the solar game. And this is um, sort of the exact, not sort of, completely the opposite of what Trump ran on, all three times. Um, China is exporting so much of, China is scaling up its renewable energy sector at such a pace that in 2023, they had already met their 2030 Paris climate goals. They are still onlining a lot of coal and gas power plants. However, the scale at which China is onlining its renewable energy sector is, I mean, an order of magnitude greater than most countries. I believe last year alone, it was able to create more renewable energy than Brazil, Chile, the UK, Belgium, and Sweden combined. I mean, this is a monumental feat. This year, we've seen that their emissions may have, we will find out within, I guess, a year or two if this is correct, but it looks like their emissions may have peaked. And if that's the case, then the renewable energy sector will start bringing down their emissions. They're also exporting everything that they can, their own, not just solar panels, but their own, oh my gosh, what are they called? Electric vehicles. that market is now all over the world. And I think China is the number one trading partner of almost every country in the world now. So we have already lost the race to China.
I will just
We're at 2 o'clock.
real quickly echo what Drake said. Again, if you want to put something in your letters to your congresspeople, ask them how disentangling our supply chains from the country that produces the most stuff in the world and basically giving them fertile ground to sell to everybody else in the world is going to increase United States energy dominance. It's not. Well, energy is a global commodity. This equipment is going to be sourced and sold to somebody. And all we have done with this bill is we've given China a running head start. So anything you hear from the talking heads about us punishing China, or set aside the fact that China's not paying for the tariffs, we are. Set aside all that stuff. We are just giving them free reign to own probably the next major area. This will be not just the industrial revolution, this will be the data and the energy revolution, and they will own it hook, line, and sinker.
Thank you. On that note, which is a little bit of a downer, but it also gives you the information to go talk to your members of Congress. We're going to end the webinar. Thank you, Drake. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Leonard. Wonderful information. I will try to go through the cute questions and respond one-on-one if we didn't get to you. Again, many thanks.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much, boss.
Thank you.
Thank you all.